Welcome once more to Ruben Sir's classes. Today I am going to teach you another very important poem for class 10. It's called Fire and Ice by Robert Frost. Now, first of all, as I always told when I take classes, as I always say, you should know at least 2 or 3 lines or 2 or 3, something about the author. Now, Robert Frost, he is an American poet, but his poems were not published in America. His first poem was published in England, and then he became very, very famous, and then he went back to America and his poems were published there. He has also won a Pulitzer Prize in literature. Robert Frost is a very famous poet who has written many, many beautiful poems, either dealing with nature or he deals with the sentiments of the poor people. Now, today I'm going to teach you Fire and Ice. Now, before I could go further to teaching you Fire and Ice, let me tell you what are the poetic devices that have been used in this poem. Now, poetic devices are very, very important. The figure of speech, literary device, poetic devices, these are all very important for you to understand and know. It can just appear for a 1 mark, but as I told you, that 1 mark is also very important for your board exam. So, the poetic devices used here are alliteration. As you know, what is alliteration? Alliteration are the repetition of consonant sounds. Remember that. It is a repetition of consonant sounds, not vowel sounds. So here in this poem, there are some words like some say, world will. See, some, it starts with S, and say also starts with S, having the same consonant sound, and that is why it is an alliteration. And here the world will, both starting with consonant sounds, WW, and hence that is also an alliteration. So the first poetic device used there is alliteration. Then we have paradox. Now, what is a paradox? A paradox is a true statement which seems to be untrue when you read the poem. It's a true statement. Now, when I tell you the world will end, now everybody knows that one day the world is going to end, it is going to perish. But once the world ends, the world is not going to end another time. It cannot end twice. It can end only once. When the world ends, it will end only once. So it's a true statement. But here the poet says that, but if it had to perish twice, and that is untrue. It cannot perish twice. And that is why the poetic device used there is paradox. So I hope you understood what is the meaning of paradox. Paradox is a true statement which seems to be untrue. So the poetic device used there is paradox. And the line that has been used is, but if it had to perish twice. Then the next one is symbolism. Symbolizing something. Symbolism is also another poetic device. Now here there are 2 symbols, fire and ice. They both symbolize something. Fire symbolizes desire and ice symbolizes hatred. So that is why there is a poetic device also called symbolism. Fire, desire, ice, hatred. So these are the 2 devices there. This is the device symbolism and these are the 2 symbols. Now for the board exam, they can ask you, what does fire symbolize and what does ice symbolize? So you should know that answer immediately. Fire symbolizes desire and ice symbolizes hatred. So that is the poetic device. And the next one is imagery. Imagery is a figure of speech where an object, a person, or a thing, okay, or a situation has another meaning other than its literate meaning. See, that's the meaning of saying imagery. Imagery means it's a figure of speech where, okay, it's a figure of speech where an object, a person, or a situation, okay, has another meaning other than its literate meaning. Now, for example, fire here. Fire means heat, light. See, both the meanings are like that. Fire gives you heat, fire gives you light. But here in this poem, it is giving another meaning. Fire means, fire stands for desire. And ice, the real meaning of ice is coldness, okay? Then indifference, intolerance, that is the meaning of ice. But in this poem, ice stands for hatred. And that is why the poetic device is imagery. So once again, I would like to explain it to you once more so that you would never forget it. The poetic devices used here in this poem is alliteration, then paradox. Alliteration, I think every one of you know what is an alliteration. It is a repetition of consonant sounds. Paradox is a true statement which seems to be untrue. And the line that is used here is, but if it had to perish twice. The next one is symbolism. Symbolism is something that symbolizes. It gives a meaning, another meaning. Now, for example, fire symbolizes desire in this poem, and ice symbolizes hatred. And the next one is imagery. Now, what do you mean by imagery? It is a figure of speech where an object, a person, or a situation has another meaning other than its literal meaning. The literal meaning of fire means heat, light, and ice means cold, intolerance, indifference. That is the real meaning. But in this poem, fire stands for desire and ice stands for hatred. And that is why the figure of speech used there is imagery. Now, I hope you understood all these figures of speech and poetic devices. Now, I'm going to teach you the lesson. I'm going to teach you the lesson fire and ice. Now, actually, they will ask you for the exam. You have to learn, for the exam, you have to learn the central idea of the poem. They can ask you for the examination, what is the central idea of the poem? Now, Robert Frost, okay, the central idea of the poem, Robert Frost, in this poem, Fire and Ice, expresses the idea that the world would end in either two ways, either by fire or by ice. Now, what he means by saying either by fire or either by ice. Now, here in this poem, Robert Frost symbolizes fire as the human desires, the cruelty, the greed, etc. So because of these desires, as the desires of human beings are increasing and increasing day by day, it's because of the desires that is being increasing, a lot of destruction is being done to the earth. And because of that, one day, the earth will perish. It will be destructed. And the second thing is that he says that ice symbolizes indifference in human beings. There is a lot of indifference in the relationship, like hatred for others, having a kind of hatred to what you see. Okay, you're hating other people because of many things. So that is another thing that is being said in the poem. The poet has the view that both fire and ice are equally competent. Means they are both equally good for destroying the earth. The earth can either be destroyed by fire or it can be destroyed by ice. And fire stands for the desires of man. Okay, man wants more and more. He desires more and more. and I stands for hatred. And what Robert Frost wants of his readers, or what he wants the people is, please keep away these desires from you, because desires are harmful and hatred is also harmful. We should not keep any hatred in our hearts. If you have any hatred to any person, you should remove the hatred from your heart, because it's like poison in your heart that would poison yourself. And because of hatred in your heart, you will also not have a peaceful life. So that is what the central idea of the poem is, fire and ice. And I hope you understood the central idea of the poem. Now I'm going to go to the poem. The first stanza, some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. Now the poet says that some people on the earth, he's dividing it into two sections. He says that there is a debate going on the earth. There is a big debate on the earth, and the debate is that some of the people are for fire and some of the people are for ice. So some of the people are saying, or that means some say, that the world is going to end in fire. And he says some say the world will end in ice. But Robert Frost, he says, for what I have tasted of desire, it means that he has already experienced the disadvantages of desire. That's what he tries to tell us. He has experienced the desires, the disadvantages of desires. And so he says, I hold. I hold means I am on the side of the people who debate that the world would end in fire. I am in favor of fire. It means I support fire. Favor here stands for support. So in the first stanza, Robert Frost tells us that there is a debate going on in the world, and some of them say the world will end in fire, and the other half says that the world will end in ice. But according to Robert Frost, he says that I am in favor of the people who say that the world will end in fire. Now, why is Robert Frost favoring the people who say that the world will end in fire? He favors them because he has experienced desires and the disadvantages of desires. He has gone through that experience. And that is why he says that he holds. He holds here means he takes the side of those people who say the world will end in fire. So in these lines, the poet analyzes the views of the people. He's analyzing the views of the people and says that there are two possible causes for the end of the world. On one side, there are people who are saying that the world will end with fire. Here, fire represents or fire symbolizes the extreme desire, anger, greed, etc. present within of every human being. So that is what it means. Okay, so he's trying to analyze. The poet is trying to analyze the views of the people and states that there are two possible causes according to the debate, according to the people. There are two possible causes for the end of the world. On one side, there are people who say that the world is going to end because of fire. Here, fire represents or fire symbolizes hatred, anger, desire, greed. All these things it symbolizes. Present, and all these things are present within human beings. On the other side, there is another view. The other side, the debate, the people say that the world will end in ice. Your eyes, what does it represent? The eyes represents the human emotions of hatred, intolerance, coldness, etc. So that is what it represents in human beings, the intolerance, the hatred we have to others, the coldness we have to others. That is what it represents. So the poet says that he has his own experience. The poet from his experience believes. Now the poet believes from his experience. What does he believe? What does the poet believe from his experience? From his experience, the poet believes that the world will end in fire because he has experienced it. They can ask you a question for the board. Why does the poet agree that the world will end in fire? The poet agrees with the people that say that the world will end in fire because he has already tasted and experienced that particular problem. He has experienced desire. The poet remains with the people who say, or the poet is in favor of the people who say that the world will end in fire. Now I'm going to read the second stanza. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Now see this particular line, please underline that line. But if it had to perish twice, the figure of speech or the poetic device used there is paradox. Paradox. Now what is a paradox? Paradox is a true statement that seems to be untrue. Now why in this line is it a paradox? Because the poet says, but if it had to perish twice, if the world had to perish twice. Now the poet is saying that I agree with the people who say that the world will end in fire. Now he is saying, if the world ends in fire, and again if the world will end in ice, and that is impossible. Once the world ends, it will end. Then it will not end another time. And that is why a true statement that seems to be untrue. That's the meaning of it. A true statement that seems to be untrue, and the poetic device used there is paradox. I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Suffice means be sufficient. So the poet is telling us in the second stanza that he knows about hate. He knows a lot of things that people hate and how people hate each other. So that is why he says, I think I know enough of hate. So in these lines, the poet thinks that if the world had to end twice, ice would also be able to destroy the world. For the poet, ice, hatred, is as powerful as fire. For him, he says, ice is also another competent for fire. It is as great, or it is as powerful as fire. In human beings, hatred is long lasting. In human beings, if we have a hatred for somebody, the hatred is long lasting and it remains through the life. Thus the poet thinks that ice or hatred will be sufficient to bring to the end of the world. So in the second stanza, the poet says that if the world is to end twice, that is impossible for the world to end twice, and that is why the poetic device used there is paradox. He says that he knows enough of hate. He knows how much hate human beings keep in their hearts, keep in their minds, which is not removed. It remains in their hearts for a very, very, very long time. And this can cause a lot of problems among human beings that live on the earth. And ice is as powerful as fire, and it also can bring it is also sufficient to bring the end of the world. So this is what the poem is about. And I hope you understood this poem. The only things that are important in this poem is that you should know the symbols that have been used. What is the symbols? Okay, and what is the following poetic device used in the poem? Is it alliteration? And also you must know all the poetic devices. I have given you all the poetic devices. So please listen to this video once, twice, thrice. Subscribe and share it with your friends. I will come back to you with another poem. Hope you enjoyed this poem. Thank you.